never mentioned that there were men as dark as this. Wow, look at that nose. He's just like a pig. He's a monster! Hi!
In today's episode, I'm joined by Will Chou. He is a YouTuber. I want to start off by thanking you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I reached out because a while back, I think in 2012, you posted a video titled How to Talk to Asian Girls. Can you give the audience some idea of what that video discussed?
So this was when I started out on YouTube a long time ago. It was one of my first videos, so I really didn't know what I was doing. But the summary of it was I just wanted to express my point and become a YouTuber. So I thought of something that people would be interested in, and then did a very off-the-cuff, low production video on the topic.
So my next question is that you mentioned in the video that Asian girls are more conservative than girls of other races. Can you give me an example of how Asian girls would be more conservative?
Yeah, so it's important to acknowledge culture. It's not something that you can just ignore, like we're different and that's something that we should be proud of. So in terms of what that means for women and Asians, there's definitely conservative nature there. Long story short, like in terms of the culture, of course, Asian parents usually want their women to succeed, not be taken out by drugs or alcohol or just goofing off in life. They want them to succeed. So career is very important, and obviously that implies a lot in terms of how conservative they are. They don't want their children to go out and party all the time. So some of that bleeds over. Not all of it, of course. You know, sometimes certain women want to be independent from their parents, so they react kind of to the extreme or not in line with what their parents want. But in general, like some of what your parents want bleeds over into you. Does that make sense?
Basically, if you're a guy trying to pursue Asian women, you need to take in consideration the family culture, because like that will play a role in whether or not how an Asian woman like responds to your advances.
Absolutely. So if you're someone who has their shit together and you have a great job, you're doing well in your career, you're empathetic, and you have a lot of areas checked off that she likes and probably her parents like. You're not into drugs, you're not addicted to cocaine, you're not drinking alcohol all the time. Those are things that are attractive traits to her.
So you also mentioned that there are different types of Asian girls in your video, including whitewashed ones. How are these particular girls different, and what is your strategy for like each type of girl that you would think represents Asian women?
So if you're born in America or Canada or wherever, you're going to pick up a lot of the culture from that area. Sometimes so much so that you're more so American than Chinese, as an example. So with that in mind, it's important to understand that not all of what you would do to attract a Chinese-born Asian would work for an American-born Asian. So to give you an example, Chinese-born Asians are kind of completely different in terms of behavior. They don't speak English well, and if you were to ever meet them, let's say they immigrated to America, they're much more superficial and obvious about it. So they're looking for, if you're a doctor, engineer, you're a lawyer, or just high earner, and they will make obvious signs or reactions of, how impressed they are if they see that. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil people or that superficiality is bad. I used to think so in a way, but after kind of like learning more about the world and becoming more mature, I mean, it's a part of their culture. Like, they grew up poor and everyone there was poor and they had to hustle to succeed. So it makes sense that they care about money, because if you're struggling to put food on the table or pay for your children's education, money matters to an extent. Whereas American women, of course, they care about that, but of course, they have a lot of other desires and values that are part of the cultural programming, but also something that's valuable to humans in general as well. So other than money, they may care about passion. They may care about whether a man is passionate about their career, ambitious about it. They might care about other things to a more pronounced degree. So not saying that Asian-born women won't care about these things, but they're less pronounced. So maybe they care about someone who is a hard worker, someone who could be a good potential father, who takes care of their children, someone who is loyal and will not cheat on them, and shows proof of that.
Okay, so if I understand, it's for the Chinese women in particular who were born in China, it may matter more if you have material things, but if an American-born Chinese or somebody who was born in the West, it may be other factors such as a drive to succeed.
Yeah, but don't make it too binary, because all women kind of care about all these factors, but they're just kind of weighting them differently, if that makes sense.
As an Asian guy, what are your thoughts on Asian women who date white men, either because they're whitewashed or they might not find Asian men to be attractive?
Yeah, so this is a huge topic in the Asian community. So I'm also a blogger. I've written for Amped Asia magazine, and I've been in the Asian male community for a few years now, just kind of hearing what people have to say, and then responding to my followers' comments and complaints about it. And one thing I do want to say is that at the end of the day, we all just want to be treated equal and given the same opportunities. And so I think that's where a lot of the angst comes from the Asian community, male community. And I think the internet kind of is just one part of the community. So on there's people who are oftentimes very negative and vocal, but that's the vocal minority. I've also seen people in real life who don't really go online much, and they're Asian males, and they are just badasses, and they do well with women and of different cultures. So there are generalities there, but there are people who do well. For me personally, I acknowledge it as a reality. If you just look at the OkCupid data or other statistics, it's a fact that we do kind of worse off than other groups like white men. That being said, there's a lot we can do to empower ourselves and take it positively rather than just complain and spread negativity into the world. So from what my whole ethos and philosophy is studying what successful people do, in this case, successful Asian men, and emulating that. So the other day I was at the restaurant and I saw a very muscular Asian guy who had kind of nerdy glasses, and he was having dinner with this beautiful white women there. And that's not very common. If you just go on the forums or Facebook groups, you'll see a lot of people saying how, they don't get any white women, and it sucks, and it's horrible, and it's unfair because mainstream media and films have made Asians look effeminate. And that's probably partially true, but then what are you going to do about it? This guy I was seeing in front of me at the restaurant, he was succeeding, and 2 days before that, I saw another Asian guy with another white woman, and they were just walking about, just having a good time. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm I could stay on these Facebook groups and just kind of like read these posts, or I can kind of like watch these people. The other couple I saw, they were playing mini golf because I was playing mini golf too. And the girl he was with was beautiful and Latina, or I couldn't tell, but it seemed like Latina. And she was in a dress, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm like, well, what can I learn from this? How can I improve? And I think the big takeaway was like, these guys were having fun. They were clearly athletic. They went to the gym, and they were kind of muscular, and they were also clearly stylish to a certain extent. I mean, they weren't like style gods, but they were just wearing Crocs or anything. Like, they had a decent style. So I think the big message for me is that, like, rather than complain about it, there's definitely something you could do positively. If you study successful people, if you study the people who are succeeding and you learn from that, go to the gym, learn, improve your style, improve your communication and social skills, you will have a better chance. And the odds are stacked against you, but if you look at history, the odds were stacked against so many different people. Martin Luther King, Bruce Lee. I mean, both of his families boycotted his wedding, but he still married a white wife despite that. And if you read Bruce Lee's biography, there's so much you can learn about how he did things that other people still don't do to this day. And that's why he succeeded in a very much more racist time than us right now. I mean, he was very proud to be who he was and proud to be Asian. And I'm seeing right now that a lot of Asians are not proud to be Asian and kind of hide away or pretend not to be Asian.
Okay, so you see why, if I can summarize, you see why there may be animosity within the Asian male community for white male, Asian female, but you don't necessarily have that same feeling. It's not something that you're hostile towards.
Yes. So most people, a lot of Asians online at least, have that feeling, but just having matured in the last couple of years and just kind of looked at it from a different angle and done a lot of research, read a lot of articles from different perspectives about it, I see the different points. And if a white person dates an Asian, I tip my hat off to him. Like, may the best man win. And frankly, it's kind of immature in a way, considering that there's billions of Asian women, to have a scarcity mindset and think that, one Asian woman dating a white man means that you can't find another Asian is a little bit short-sighted.
Okay. Talking about Asian male, white female couples, is that, I guess, like, do you see that as the, I guess, backlash or the alternative for Asian men who see Asian women out marrying to white men? Or is that, like, what are your thoughts on Asian male, white female?
Oh, no, it's definitely not just it's not backlash. I think they're kind of almost obsessed about it in a way, because I think they kind of they hold, I can relate, they hold white women to a higher pedestal in a way, because they've grown up in America and white women are like the mainstream thing, and they see them all in the movies, and they see them in class all the time, and the homecoming queen and so forth is usually this beautiful white person. So I don't think it's because of backlash, like, oh, I'm gonna do this as revenge. It's much more so because they're very attracted to them, but they also see that it's like harder to get, and there's a lot of drive there to really just be treated equally and have the same opportunities as everyone else. And when that's not there, I think they can get a little fetishized, and more so it's just seen as something that they would like one day. That being said, I think although I can relate, and I definitely fell into this way a few years ago. I've kind of matured after just writing a lot about it and seeing many perspectives. And I think women should be treated equally too. And I don't necessarily want to fetishize someone because that objectifies them, and that shouldn't be done. They're people, and they should be respected as people with their own thoughts and opinions rather than an object. And if it's a white person or a Hispanic person or an Asian person, doesn't matter to me as long as I'm attracted to them and so forth. That's great. That being said, I personally am attracted to white women, like many Asian males too, and I do kind of prefer them.
Talking about fetishization for a second, what are your thoughts on Asian women who complain about men who find them to be attractive because of their race or the concept of yellow fever?
So, yeah, I definitely think for other ethnicities like white men or Hispanic men, black men, Asian women are seen as exotic. So it definitely can be something where it's like yellow fever or a fetishization. Or sometimes they just kind of like them more. It doesn't have to be something where they're being objectified in any way. They just kind of prefer them because they're kind of exotic and maybe harder to obtain. Kind of in the same way how I or other Asian men see white women. I would say it's perfectly fine, but just in terms of your success and your own kind of mental health and career success and dating success, I think women want to be treated as people rather than objects. And if you can do that, you'll probably succeed with them more, especially nowadays with the whole feminist movement. It's not just feminists, but just people in general. They want to be treated as people. So if you can see them as people and ask them about their opinions, their hobbies, their interests, and rather than just kind of stare at their boobs or like keep bringing the subject back to like the fact that they're white or the fact that they're Asian or the fact that they're hot, you're going to get a lot farther.
Okay. This leads into my next point. I actually wanted to mention before I ask the next question, that I had talked about Amptasia in an earlier episode because I've read some of their articles as well. And this goes into the point of the shifting narrative because there's a writer named Cindy Young who wrote about, what to do to date Asian women. And it was like, don't date me don't pursue me because I'm Asian. But then now she's writing about how Asian men need to stop criticizing white male, Asian female. So I've seen that shifting narrative on Amptasia, and that's going to bring in my next question. So like when you made that video in 2012, the narrative, in my opinion, the way I saw it was that you really just could not say that you liked Asian women. It was an automatic no-no. In 2013, an article was written titled, I think, Why Yellow Fever is Different from Having a Type. So that was, between what I mentioned with Cindy Young and then that article, that's what it was. But now, like, I don't know if you read the article I gave you in the email in 2018. Celeste Ng wrote the article.
I read like half of it.
Yeah, when Asian women are harassed for marrying non-Asian men, and it seems like now the narrative has shifted where like Asian women are now being criticized for their dating preferences, whereas a couple of years ago they were criticizing everybody else. Have you seen that shift? If so, what are your thoughts on it? If not, what do you just think overall?
I haven't seen that shift. I think maybe it's there, but I think it's kind of always been this way. I really didn't see much of it at all back in 2012, or as much arguments and so forth. Nowadays, I see a lot more talk about it, but I think it's still always been there. There's this YouTube channel called Wong Fu Productions. It's very well known, and they're basically Asian directors. They have like millions of subscribers, and they made a great short called Yellow Fever like 15 years ago, and then they did one like 2 years ago, kind of like reliving that and bringing in modern thoughts. I highly recommend everyone to watch it. The second one's called Yellow Fever 2, and I recommend the second one because it gives so many different perspectives on it from everyone's angle. I think the big thing that's changed is that like, well, everything's changing. Like things are trending more towards equality and the fact that it's complex, but it's definitely much more acknowledging the fact that it's less okay to be racist, and there's all different types of people and perspectives involved. Going back to that article and her being criticized, from what I read, I think she had some great points, and there's also been a few female writers in Amped Asia magazine who have wrote about the same topic, and those articles were fantastic because I completely agreed. And there's many Asian males who don't agree, and they're like, man, it just kind of sucks that, you know, all the white men are taking our Asian women, and it just, like, they just put some fantastic points that, from a rational standpoint, made perfect sense to me. Like, maybe it's the fact that it's not that you're Asian or white, it's the fact that this guy is just better on many different levels. He cares for me more, he's more funnier, he is more empathetic, he's more ambitious, he's hardworking, we have similar hobbies. And so another point they made that I kind of hinted at earlier was that, like, why do you have a scarcity mindset? Like, Asians are one of the most populous groups in the entire world. There's billions of us. So it's a very scarce mindset to kind of think like, oh, they're taking away from us. I think it kind of plays into it the fact that Asian males do have a harder time in general in America for all the media reasons. But I don't think that tweeting someone 27 times with negativity, as that guy in the article who was mentioned did, is going to change anything. Like, harassing a Asian woman and spewing curse words at her and sending 27 tweets at her is just making the world a worse place. Like, she was clearly very traumatized and hurt by that, and apparently she deals with this like every day. Like, no one wants to see that.
I get that. No, there's no point in sending somebody messages every day saying, you like white men, like, that's not going to produce anything. I think, but I will say that I think what some men may be concerned about is that Asian women were saying that it's not okay to have a dating preference, and now that we're seeing that they have a dating preference of their own, which may be of the same kind of like fetishization level that they claim that they've been dealing with. I guess Asian. Some people might think that Asian women are trying to dodge that by making it pointing to the people who are saying, "Oh, you're harassing me," all that, and not actually dealing with the substance, which is like the hypocrisy or the actual self-hate that's going on, because there are examples of Asian women like dating white men for reasons that are suspect, and for a group of people to go around calling everybody else out for their weird preferences, whether or not they may be weird. They never gave, for example, the benefit of the doubt for a guy saying maybe he just likes Asian women because, he likes the features, or he doesn't see them as a submissive China doll. It's just that he grew up around a bunch of Asians. It was never that. But, like, for Asian women now, they want to be given the benefit of the doubt, where it's like, no, I like white men, but it's not like my preference is different. It's not the same. I like this guy because he treated me nice. I know what you're saying. You know what I mean? It's just like there's no need to go around tweeting Asian women saying, oh, you like Asian men, white men, blah, blah, blah. But, like, if you're going to go on a crusade saying everybody else is racist and treat me as a person, but then you treat somebody else based off of their race differently, and now you
The
play
thing-
the victim. That's I think where people get really like, what are you talking about? You know?
Yeah, so I disagree with that because, respectfully disagree because I've hung around a lot of young Asian women, just being who I am, Asian male. And from what I can tell, that's not the case at all. I don't think they have a preference for white men. And so what you're probably seeing are probably more the exception than the rule, maybe like one-off anecdotal cases that kind of people highlight on based on confirmation bias. I don't really see that as much. In fact, that was another point touched on in the White Fever 2 video or Yellow Fever 2 video that still to this day, like you see these Asian men complaining about it, but if you look at the statistics, more Asian women by far marry Asian men. So it may just be more confirmation bias and a lot of the vocal minority of Asian men kind of like playing it up like they're the victim. And so what I will say is that not all Asian men are like this. Like you do get this like crowd that kind of complains a lot when in reality like they kind of have it pretty decent. There's a lot of positive ones too out there that just kind of don't go online as much.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, so like the Tila Tequilas of the world are going to make the headlines because they're just out there, but they don't represent how most Asian women view, I guess, race or dating for that matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I actually wanted to bring in the men of color perspective for a second, talking about, I guess, Asian women who may have grown up in a white family. I wanted to quote a book called Asian Americans on Campus, Racialized Space and White Power. It's a little long, but I think it's important. When asked how her white family would react to her dating an African American male, Amy, an adopted Korean American sophomore, says the following. I feel like growing up in the South, my mom's never been big on black or Hispanic people. Asian, white, whatever is okay. I think she'd be okay with anything, but I guess she says, like, I don't see how they'd be attractive. Sometimes she's like, I'm not attracted to them, so I don't know whether you would be or not. Though Amy describes her partner preference based on the person, not the race, her white mother negatively describes African American and Hispanic males as unattractive and implies that they are less desirable. In so doing, the mother discourages her daughter from dating African American and Hispanic males. Do you think that that's also like just an outlier, particularly like if you're whitewashed, or is that something that somebody who's black or Hispanic who's a man may have to consider?
It's something you have to consider. Racism can't be ignored completely. We can't just assume that it never existed or it's completely gone now. Like, you know, as I mentioned, like 30, 40 years ago, Bruce Lee married a white woman and both families boycotted the wedding. And then, then there's like, go back a few more decades, and then there's slavery, there's segregation. So we can't completely ignore it. I mean, we're still kind of fighting that. Women are still fighting being treated equal as men. So it's definitely there. We are trending in the right direction. Like Will Smith said in like a talk show interview recently, I saw that it sure as heck wasn't as bad as it was 20 years ago. So we are trending in the right direction, but we have to acknowledge it, just like we have to acknowledge our differences and be proud of them. If we were all the same, then life would be less interesting. But it is something we have to consider and work on and just put our best foot forward. I've definitely seen Asian parents who have straight up said that, like, I prefer you date someone who's Asian. I really would hate it if you dated a black person. But it's possible. One of the top personal finance bloggers in the world is called Ramit Sethi, and I follow his Instagram, and he posted a few pictures of his sister, and his sister is Indian, he's Indian, and his sister married a black man, and they have 3 kids. And Ramit is very funny and also very matter of fact, and he'll tell you straight up, yeah, my parents are racist. Or I mean, I don't. He hasn't actually said that, but he'll be the type to like straight up tell you that and joke about it. Because in many other ways, he's like, yeah. He talks a lot about Asian parenting and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, they're very cheap, they're racist. He's very like matter of fact about it. So considering that, somehow this man still won over his sister and won over his parents, and they were okay with it. And I watched this guy and I looked at him and I wondered, how did he do it? And just based off the photos I saw, I'm like, I can tell this guy is, he's very well-mannered. I can tell he's very kind, respectful. He's probably has a very good job. He probably is a very like upstanding guy. He was well-dressed. He was very big and muscular too, so that probably helped. Not saying that you have to be big and muscular, because you don't. But it goes kind of back to like the fact that although it's less likely, we can make it happen. People have achieved more impossible things in life. Just put your best foot forward and kind of learn from successful people.
And that leads to my last question. Outside of those possible barriers, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to a guy who is struggling to date Asian women?
Okay, so this guy could be any ethnicity, Asian, white, black. So I'm going to keep that in mind while answering this question. So when you're looking to date women, whether it's Asian or just any type of women, there's a lot of science and evolutionary biology behind it. Attraction isn't a choice. It's an unconscious decision based on millions of years of split testing and your genetic code, your algorithm. So that's why women all over across the world will kind of answer the same questions when you ask them what do they want first in a man. They want someone who's funny. They want someone who is kind. They want someone who is smart. Why do women all over the world answer those questions the same, despite having different cultures and different upbringings? It's survival and reproduction. It's evolutionary. So the good news is that you can improve a lot of the traits that are hardwired into women to help them succeed. There's a lot of traits. There's probably like a top 15 list based on a lot of studying I've done on the science behind it. But the ones I want to highlight that are the most underrated and not mentioned enough are emotional intelligence, so empathy, social intelligence, which is kind of related to that, general intelligence, which is like reading a lot of, or learning a lot of stuff like history or whatever you like to learn, physics, and improving that. Practical skills, so handyman work, plumbing, car mechanic, all those things are useful. And I would say a general level of fashion. So if you can get above average in fashion, that does really well. And then outside of that, I think assertiveness and kindness are completely misinterpreted in society, and that's why a lot of people don't succeed. So many nice guys are not actually nice. They're doing something nice to get something back. So that's not nice. That's not selflessness. That's manipulation. So by being actually nice and kind, that means doing kind stuff without any expectation of ever getting anything back in return. So if you can do that, that's what women will actually respond to. And in terms of assertiveness, this is why assholes usually get the women. They have a lot of other traits that succeed as well, like they're usually very muscular and well-dressed, but also they're very assertive. So they'll stand up for their family, they'll stand up for the women, whereas nice guys usually will not, because they're less, they're more spineless and they're scared of confrontation. So it's not about being rude or an asshole or a bad person. It's about being assertive and genuinely kind. So if you can work on all those things, they will be universally attractive, and they will trigger a primal response based on millions of years of evolutionary programming.
Okay. But like if you had to choose one of those, yeah.
If I had to give one piece of advice, it would be well-rounded rather than really good at one thing. So it's better to be a 6 out of 10 in all those things I mentioned than a 10 out of 10 in one of them.
Okay. All right. So those are all my questions. I wanted to thank you for joining me. If you have anything else to add, go ahead. Otherwise, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.